If someone in your family needs to move into aged care, there is a fear that sits underneath almost every one of these decisions, that the government will force you to sell the family home to pay for it. Here is what actually happens, and it is more protected than most families realise, with a couple of real catches worth knowing before anyone signs anything. Start with the biggest protection because it's the one that surprises people most. If a protected person is still living in the home, a spouse or in some cases a close family member who's cared for the resident for years and is on an eligible payment, the home is not counted in the aged care means assessment at all. Not partially, not at a discounted value. Completely excluded, for as long as that protected person keeps living there. This isn't a temporary grace period, it's a standing rule that can protect the family home indefinitely as long as someone who qualifies stays put. Most families walk into an aged care conversation assuming the home is automatically in play the moment one partner moves into care. If the other partner is still living there, it usually isn't. Picture a couple where the husband moves into full-time residential care and his wife stays in the family home they've owned for 30 years. As long as she's there, that home simply doesn't appear in his means assessment at all, not at 10% of its value, not capped, not counted. The family's biggest asset stays completely off the table for as long as she keeps living in it. Now, here's the part that catches people who assume the only options are pay a lump sum or sell the house. When your family works out how to pay for accommodation, there are two ways to do it. A refundable accommodation deposit, a lump sum paid up front and refunded later, or a daily accommodation payment, an ongoing daily fee instead. Nobody is required to choose the lump sum. Families can choose the daily payment instead, often funding it by renting out the family home rather than selling it, keeping the asset in the family while covering the ongoing cost from the rental income. Selling is a choice some families make because it's simpler, not a requirement the system forces on you. Take a solo homeowner entering care with no protected person left in the house. Instead of selling, the family could rent the home out for, say, $500 a week and use that rental income to cover the daily accommodation payment instead of handing over a lump sum. The home stays in the family, potentially to be sold much later on the family's own terms, or not sold at all. The rent simply does the job the lump sum would have done. So what happens if there's no protected person still living there? Say both partners are single, or a solo homeowner is entering care. The home does get counted in the means assessment in that case. But here's the second surprise. Its value is capped. As of last year, the amount of the home counted toward the means test is capped at just over $200,000, indexed twice a year, regardless of whether the home is actually worth that or worth $2 million. So even in the scenario where the home genuinely is assessable, the means test isn't applied against its full market value. A family with a valuable, fully owned home is only assessed against a fraction of what it's actually worth. Take a solo retiree whose home is genuinely worth $1.2 million with no protected person still living there. You'd assume the full $1.2 million gets counted. It doesn't. Only the capped amount, a little over $200,000, is added to their means assessment. The remaining $1 million of value simply isn't part of the calculation at all. There's a related, separate protection worth knowing too, because it covers a slightly different moment. If someone leaves their home due to illness and moves into care, the home can also stay exempt from the age pension's own assets test for up to 2 years from the date they enter care, a completely separate rule from the aged care means test we've just covered, giving families breathing room on the pension side while they work out their longer-term plan. So, a single retiree who moves into care with no protected person left at home isn't forced into an immediate pension reassessment either. They get up to 2 years before that particular clock starts running, on top of whatever aged care payment option they've chosen. It's worth being clear on who each of these actually protects, because it's not one size fits all. The protected person exemption is the strongest one, and it only applies while a qualifying person genuinely still lives in the home. The capped value and the ARAD to DAPE choice apply regardless of whether there's a protected person, so they're relevant to almost every family working through this decision. And the 2-year age pension exemption is specifically about pension eligibility, separate from what the aged care provider itself is assessing. Now, the honest caveat, because none of this means aged care is free or that keeping the home costs nothing. Choosing the daily accommodation payment instead of selling still means an ongoing cost has to be funded from somewhere: rental income, other savings or family contributions, for as long as the resident is in care. Renting out a home costs money too: agents' fees, maintenance, the odd vacancy between tenants, and none of that disappears just because the alternative is worse. And if there's no protected person, and the family does eventually decide to sell, that decision is about genuinely accessing the home's value, not about the government seizing anything. The protections are real, but they're protections against forced sale and against the home's full value being used against you, not a guarantee that aged care costs nothing. So the honest picture is this: nobody automatically loses the family home the day a parent or partner enters aged care. If a spouse or eligible family member is still living there, it's fully protected. If it isn't, its counted value is capped well below what it's actually worth. And even when it is accessible, families get a genuine choice between paying up front or paying as they go, often by renting the home out rather than selling it. The fear that shapes so many of these decisions is bigger than the reality, but the reality still requires a real plan, not just relief. 2 honest notes before you go. First, the protected person rules. The capped home value and the payment options are reviewed and indexed regularly, so confirm the current figures and your own eligibility with the Department of Health, Disability and Ageing or Services Australia before relying on them. Second, this is general information, not personal advice. Whether a family member counts as a protected person and which payment option genuinely suits your situation depends entirely on your specific circumstances, so this is exactly the kind of decision to take to a registered aged care financial advisor or a free aged care specialist officer appointment through Services Australia before any agreement is signed. If this took some of the fear out of the decision you're facing, tell me in the comments. It helps me know what to cover next. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.